What is this? What is this inside the global scope? In the constructor function? What is this in the arrow functions? How can I have exactly this, what I want? Today's topic is JavaScript, this keyword. My name is Zura, and during the video all your questions will be answered. In order to define what is this inside the function, you need to find what is the call site of this function, where the function is executed from, because this keyword inside the function is 100% dependent on the call site. So the question is, or the statement is, go locate where a function is called from. This will help you to find out what is this inside the function. What is a call site? Look at this example. We have three function declarations in the global scope and one function execution in this global scope. So we execute buzz, which inside it executes bar, which inside it executes foo. The call site for buzz is the global scope. The call site for bar is this scope, buzz scope, and call site for foo is this bar scope. This is the call site, and this is how you should inspect your function, where and how it is called from. We have four general rules applied to this binding. There are scenarios when multiple rules can be applied to the function call site. But when you inspect call site, you can understand which rule is applied to this, and then you can guess what is this inside function. The first rule is default binding when you execute function as a standalone function. We have implicit binding, explicit binding, and new binding. Look at this simple example. In this case, this refers to the global object. If you are in Node.js, this refers to the global. But if you are in a browser, this refers to the window. In this case, nor the global and neither window has a property, so this A is definitely undefined. This code has some restrictions when you run the code using strict mode. For example, if we add use strict here and we execute the code, we have an error, because when you are in strict mode, this is actually undefined. But the error using strict mode only refers when the function body runs in strict mode. If we take this strict mode from here and put it below, not in the function body, then the code runs without an error. And about strict mode, if I move this up, then the strict mode applies to the whole file, including the function foo body, and now I still have an error. In the Node.js environment, actually, this declaring a variable in a global scope, the variable is not added in the global object. But if you run this code in your browser's console, you can actually see that console log statement prints 15. This is because when you declare a variable in the global scope, it is actually added to the global window object. So we can also inspect window A, which is our 15. That's about default binding. Now let's see what is implicit binding. Now I'm going to add a new object here, which has this A property, and I am going to add the foo reference, the reference to the foo function to this object. If I execute this, the answer is still an error. Let me remove this. I use strict. The answer is still undefined. If I execute the same foo function, you see, I haven't created a new function. I use the same foo function, but I have it now, the obj has now reference to this function. So if I execute this now on the obj object, this a is 2. This demonstrates how call site affects this. So executing foo function without obj, this refers to the global object or window object, but when you execute it on obj, this a is obj a, which is 2. About explicit binding, if you are not familiar with call or apply functions, I recommend you to go and read more about this, or just write comments below, and I can provide you examples and documentation about this. But what the call and apply does, they explicitly call foo function on given object. In this case, we give obj in both examples, so both of these statements should print 2. That's why we call it explicit, because we call explicitly foo function on obj object. What if you want to hard bind an object to a function so that no matter how you execute a function, this inside the function should always be your bound object? This can be done using function bind method. Inside function prototype, we have call and apply, what we have already covered, and we also have bind. You give an argument to this bind, and the function, the method bind, creates a new function where this is your given object. We can create new foo, which we can say is foo bind object. In this case, even if we execute foo, new foo with default binding, and the answer should be undefined, it will be actually 2. Even if we have another object which has a 3, and we execute this new foo on obj2, it's still 2. So we have this new function and call it on object 2, but the answer is still 2. Even if we change the reference, obj foo is new foo. Okay, obj2 foo is new foo. So it's something like writing it inside. And when I execute obj2 foo, it's still 2. We hard bound. We did a hard bound on this foo function for the obj. No matter how you execute now this new foo function, this context inside the new foo function will always be obj. For me, the most trivial and interesting binding is new binding. When you create some object using new keyword. Probably you already know that you can use any function if you type new keyword before that function and execute it like this, it creates an object and returns this object. So when you use new keyword with a function, 4 steps are done. A brand new object is created. The newly constructed object is prototype linked to our function. The newly constructed object is set as this binding for that function call. So if you use this inside the function, this will be the newly constructed object. Unless the function returns its own alternative object, the newly invoked function will automatically return the newly constructed object if you don't return anything. So if you return explicitly something, the something will be returned and assigned to a variable, but if you don't return anything, and this is the example, we have a function foo, we use this keyword inside function foo, and with new binding we create an object bar, and this keyword inside function refers to the bar object, which is automatically returned if we don't return something. What happens when multiple bindings are applied on the single call site? In this case, we are executing foo on obj1 and obj2. This is implicit binding, and the first one prints 2 and the second one prints 3, which is obvious. But in the second, in these last 2 lines, we are actually taking object1's foo function and executing on object2. This prints 3 because this is an explicit binding, and explicit binding has always high precedence than implicit binding. Explicit versus new binding. On the following example, we pass an argument to this foo function and assign it in this A. And when we execute foo on obj1, we give it 2 and obj1 dot A is equals 2. That's obvious. Now we execute explicitly the foo function on object2 passing 3. This gives us that on object2 A is 3. But for new binding, we take our object1 foo, use it with new binding, and give it an argument 4, which constructs a new object and returns this new object. The thing is that this statement does not touch our object1 at all. Object1 still has a property equals true, but this creates a new object, and the new object has a property equal to 4. And we have hard versus new binding. For this, let's analyze this code also. We take our foo function, we do hard binding on object1, and we execute our bar function, and object1 dot A is 2. Now we take our bar function and use it with new keyword. Our object1A is still 2, but newly constructed object bars dot A is 3. So conclusion, new binding has always the highest precedence among all of them. So Now to sum up our video, this is the thing. You need to understand what is the call site of the function in order to determine what's the this inside the function. If the function is called with new binding, then the newly constructed object is this inside foo function. If function is called with core or apply with explicit binding, the given object obj2 is this inside the foo function. If the function is called with inside the context like a property of an object, like obj.foo, then obj is this inside the foo function. Otherwise, this is the default binding. And default binding is different for default environments. Like in Node.js, this is global. In a browser, this is window, and it different. Also, it doesn't work in exactly the same way. And if you are in strict mode, this is undefined. If not, it's a global object. This is the end of the video. I hope I helped you understanding what is this inside the function. If you like the video, click on the like button. If you want to see more videos from me, click on the subscribe button. Thanks for watching. See you in the next time.